Tech Cocktail Conversations, candid insights from startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from around the globe.
There's some really fundamental problems in the world. These are things in education, these are things in government and governance, and in healthcare. 1 out of 5 Americans, 22%, don't finish their antibiotics course. That creates super viruses that keeps people from getting well. And I should stop and say that we've spent quite literally hundreds of millions of dollars on public service announcements trying to convince people to finish the antibiotics course, because otherwise it's a big problem. And despite that, and despite the fact that pharma companies really care about doing this, and that we need to get people better, it's still 1 out of 5 people don't finish it. So here's the question I ask. Is this people's fault, your fault, or is this the fault of the design of our intervention? And I think when I put it that way, it's obvious it's the fault of the design of our intervention. But very few people are looking at this from the perspective where people who are sick are people. They're looked at as patients. There's a reason why pleasurable and health product are never seen in the same sentence except for this one. So what does Massive Health do? We take all of the understanding of making consumer products, true consumer products, and we come together and we make products about people's health that they love to use. A number of years ago, I became very close with this woman who had type 1 diabetes. And she was an entrepreneur, successful, sold her company, but she had to prick her finger 10 to 14 times a day, take these numbers down, her blood glucose numbers, and put them in a logbook, a physical logbook. And this is like 2008, 2009. So these numbers that determined whether she lived or died, she had to write down and then stare at to try to determine any sort of insight. Statisticians can't do that, let alone us mere mortals. So she couldn't answer the question, what's one thing that she could do today that make her life better than yesterday? She couldn't even answer the question of whether I'm doing better this week than last week. And you start looking around, it's not just her. Walt Mossberg is a type 1 diabetic. Halle Berry's a type 2 diabetic. Neither of these people, in fact, nobody has any tools that goes from a number to making sense. So a little bit of design here, a little bit of product can make people fundamentally healthier. And I think as an entrepreneur and as a designer, we have a moral obligation to use our passions to make the world a better place. So I want to be at a place where when I'm 20 people, and we're around 10 people now, I look around and I've hired people that are smarter than me every single time, so that by the time it's 20, I can't figure out how I get a job here in the first place. In terms of actually hiring, one of the most important things I think you can do as an entrepreneur is really understand your vision. There are 2 types of companies, the kind you build to flip and they exploit a market opportunity. And I'm not going to poo-poo those. Those are important, they fulfill a function. But I think there's a second type, which you're going for, your billion-dollar companies, you're building companies that last. And for those, you have to tackle a problem that matters. And once you do that, the very best people are swayed more by what matters and what their legacy will be. Woody Allen, I think, has famously said that 90% of life is showing up. Same thing in entrepreneurialism and doing a startup. You need to spend time outside of the field in which you're comfortable. Why do I say this? Because the currency of genius is metaphor. Why? Because metaphor makes the non-obvious obvious, and great ideas are almost universally obvious in hindsight. So if you can have a breadth of experience, have as many metaphors to draw from, IDEO calls these T people, where you have one very strong expertise and then you just know a lot from a lot of other groups and domains. So if you can make those analogies easily, there's nothing new under the sun. Instead, it's just recombination of the things that exist. My favorite example of this is that the Palm Pilot had that graffiti system. You'd think that to be brand new. They got patents on it. Nobody else ever come up with it. It had 90% overlap with the shorthand used in the Spanish Armada. So nothing is new. The best thing you can do is fill your head with analogy, fill your head with metaphor, and go outside of your domain, because that's where your breakthroughs are going to come from.